You walk into a room you've never been in before. Maybe a friend's new apartment, a hotel lobby, a hallway at a job you just started last week. And for one disorienting second, you know this exact moment. Not vaguely, specifically. You know what's about to be said next. You know which way you're about to turn your head. You can almost hear the next few seconds before they happen. The exact pitch of a voice, the exact angle of a shadow across the floor. You've felt this precise configuration of light, sound, and conversation before. Somewhere, sometime, in a moment you can't place and definitely never lived. It only lasts a second or two, but it's a strange kind of second, thick and slow, like the room briefly forgot what time it was. Then it's gone, as fast as it arrived, leaving nothing behind except a faint, uneasy static, the mental equivalent of a word you can't quite unsee, and you're left standing there with a strange, slightly unsettling question. What was that? But the real answer is far stranger than déjà vu being some kind of glitch in reality. It's your own brain, caught red-handed, correcting itself in real time. Here's what's actually happening inside your skull in that half second. And it starts, oddly enough, with a word borrowed from French over a century ago. The term was coined in 1876 by a philosopher named Émile Boirac. Déjà vu literally translates to already seen. For more than 100 years after that, nobody had a real explanation for what was actually happening. It got filed away next to ghosts and past lives, mostly because there was nothing solid to compare it to. A feeling with no known cause tends to get explained by whatever story is culturally available. The first real clue came from an unexpected place: hospital wards, not seance rooms. In the late 1800s, a British neurologist named John Hughlings Jackson noticed something strange in a specific group of his patients. People with a particular kind of epilepsy, where seizures originate in the temporal lobes, the regions of the brain sitting roughly behind your temples, heavily involved in memory and recognition. Right before some of these patients had a seizure, they reported an overwhelming, oddly specific feeling of having lived that exact moment before. Jackson realized this wasn't a coincidence of timing. The déjà vu was being generated, physically, by abnormal electrical activity firing straight through the exact brain circuits responsible for recognizing something as familiar, which meant for the first time, déjà vu had an address. It wasn't mystical, it was a real neurological event, produced by a real, locatable piece of brain tissue, misfiring in a very specific way. Decades later, that address got a lot more precise. A neurologist named Joseph Spat proposed something that finally explained why déjà vu feels the way it does. Specific, vivid, and completely untethered from any actual memory you can point to. Here's the part almost nobody realizes. Your brain doesn't process, "this is familiar," and "here's when I actually experienced it," as one single signal. They're two separate systems running in parallel. One region, called the rhinal cortex, handles pure familiarity, a fast general sense of "I know this," with no details attached. A completely different region, the hippocampus, handles the actual memory itself, the specific where and when. Normally, these two systems fire together, instantly and invisibly. You see a friend's face, and in the same breath you retrieve exactly who they are and how you know them. Spat's theory was that déjà vu happens when the familiarity system fires on its own, misfiring slightly, with nothing from the memory system backing it up. You get the sensation of recognition with absolutely nothing behind it, a signal with no source. That explained the feeling itself. It didn't explain something else entirely. Why déjà vu feels less like confusion and more like certainty, followed almost immediately by doubt. You don't just feel like you've lived this moment before. Within seconds, you also know, with total confidence, that you haven't. Something in you catches the error almost as fast as it appears. Why would a random misfire come with its own built-in correction? A cognitive neuroscientist named Akira O'Connor at the University of St. Andrews set out to actually watch this happen inside a working brain. His team figured out how to trigger a déjà vu-like sensation on command inside an MRI scanner, using a trick borrowed from false memory research. They read participants' long lists of closely related words: bed, pillow, blanket, snooze, without ever once saying the word sleep itself. Afterward, when asked whether they'd heard the word sleep, people would feel a strong, false sense that they had. In a smaller set of carefully designed trials, that false familiarity spike closely mirrored the sensation people describe as déjà vu. And when O'Connor's team watched the brain activity during that exact moment, they didn't just see the memory regions light up. They saw a spike in the frontal lobes, the decision-making regions near the front of the brain, areas normally associated with resolving conflicting information and checking facts for accuracy, not areas associated with storing memories at all. Which points to something almost nobody expects. Déjà vu might not be your memory system failing. It might be a completely separate system succeeding, a kind of internal fact checker, constantly and invisibly scanning your sense of familiarity against your actual stored memories, catching the rare moment when they don't line up, and flagging it before you've even consciously registered what happened. The eerie feeling isn't the malfunction, it's the alert going off correctly. There's a detail buried in the research that makes this theory even harder to dismiss. A psychologist named Alan Brown at Southern Methodist University spent years compiling decades of déjà vu studies from around the world into a single body of evidence. His research confirmed something surprisingly consistent across countries, cultures, and decades of surveys. Somewhere around 2 out of every 3 people report experiencing déjà vu at least once, and it happens far more often in your late teens and 20s than at any other point in your life, becoming noticeably rarer as you age, dropping off sharply after around 40. If déjà vu were purely a random glitch, there'd be no obvious reason for a pattern that consistent. But if déjà vu is a checking system, actively comparing new experience against a vast, constantly updating archive of old experience, the pattern makes sense immediately. In your 20s, that archive is still being built rapidly, and the comparison process is fast, sensitive, primed to catch how small inconsistencies. As you get older, some researchers argue that same checking system likely slows down along with general cognitive processing speed. The same way any fact-checking process gets slower and less frequent, the busier and more automatic the underlying system becomes over time. And there's an even stranger piece of evidence, one that shows exactly what happens when this checking system stops working correctly, not too little, but too much. A researcher named Chris Moulin, studying patients with certain forms of dementia, documented cases of something now called déjà vécu, French for already lived. Unlike ordinary déjà vu, a brief occasional flicker lasting a few seconds, déjà vécu doesn't switch off. Moulin described patients who insisted, with complete sincerity, that they had already lived every new moment they encountered. One patient refused to watch the news because he was certain he'd already seen that exact broadcast, word for word. Another stopped visiting his doctor altogether, insisting every single appointment was a repeat of one he'd already sat through. A third described entire days as feeling pre-lived, like walking through a film he'd already watched, unable to explain why nothing ever felt new. In these patients, the familiarity signal wasn't misfiring rarely and briefly. It was stuck permanently in the on position, firing constantly, with no working fact checker left to catch it and shut it down. If déjà vu is a rare, correctly firing alarm, déjà vécu is what happens when that exact same alarm breaks and gets stuck ringing forever, with nothing left to silence it, which means the fleeting, occasional version most people experience isn't a sign of something going wrong in your brain. It's proof the checking system is still working exactly the way it's supposed to, catching its rare false alarms and shutting them down again within seconds. You've actually felt a smaller, tamer version of this exact mechanism plenty of times before. You just never called it déjà vu. That specific, itchy feeling of a word sitting right on the tip of your tongue, the name you know that you know but can't quite pull out, is your brain flagging a mismatch between familiarity and retrieval in almost the exact same way. Spell check underlining a word in red before you've consciously registered that you misspelled it. That half-second flinch when a sentence you're reading almost makes sense, but something quietly, technically off about the grammar snags your attention before you can say exactly why. The uneasy feeling of missing a turn on a route you drive every day, sensing something's wrong a full block before you consciously work out which turn you skipped. Every one of those is the same basic circuit, a fast familiarity and consistency check. running constantly and mostly invisibly in the background of your mind, occasionally catching something your conscious awareness hasn't registered yet. Most of the time, it operates on something small, a word, a turn, a misplaced comma. Deja vu is simply that same circuit, scaled up for one rare, disorienting moment from a single detail to an entire lived scene. Think about how differently all of this reads once you know the mechanism behind it. A sensation that used to sit somewhere between spooky and inexplicable turns out to be almost mundane once you see the machinery underneath it. Not a window into another life, not a signal from somewhere outside your skull. Just two ordinary memory systems briefly out of sync, and a third system doing exactly its job by catching the mismatch. So the next time you walk into an unfamiliar room and feel that specific disorienting certainty that you've stood in this exact spot before, try not treating it as a glitch or a message or proof of something slipping through from somewhere it shouldn't. It's closer to the opposite of a glitch. It's a quiet, remarkably precise piece of quality control, running underneath conscious thought every single day, comparing what's happening right now against the entire archive of everything you've ever experienced. And for one brief, strange half-second, it caught a false alarm before you ever had the chance to actually believe it. You walk into a room you've never been in before, and for one disorienting second, you know this exact moment. Now you know exactly what that second actually is. Not a memory surfacing from somewhere impossible, not a glitch in anything. Proof that somewhere, deep in your skull, something is still checking your work.